The first warning was the silence. Commander Alis Vren stood on the bridge of Perseus Prime, staring at the vast black beyond the station's reinforced viewport. Space should have been alive with distant chatter, patrol reports, docking schedules, comms from inbound freighters, but all she heard was the hum of the station's artificial gravity field. Then the alarms screamed. Proximity breach. Unknown anomaly detected. The holotable flickered to life, displaying a three-dimensional map of the sector. At first, the disturbance looked like an error, just a static distortion near the station's outer defense grid. But as the screen recalibrated, the distortion grew, warping outward as though something on the other side was tearing through reality itself. "Is that a jump signature?" Alis asked, voice tight. "Negative, Commander," said Lieutenant Reza, her lead tactical officer. "It's something else. It's opening." A dark rift split the void apart, tendrils of crackling energy lashing outward. It spread wider, until it was large enough to engulf a destroyer. And then they came. Massive, twisted forms slithered through the tear ships, but not like any Alis had seen before. Their hulls pulsed, as if they were alive. Organic plating shifted across their exteriors, reshaping, growing. The ships bore no insignia, no markings of allegiance. They simply moved, a silent, coordinated wave of destruction. Unknown vessels inbound. Reza never finished. The first volley struck Perseus Prime. A dozen sapphire beams lanced out, bypassing shields like they weren't even there. Explosions rocked the station, the deck lurching beneath Alis's boots. Red emergency lighting flooded the bridge as damage reports scrolled across the screens. Sections G through L had been breached. Hull integrity was plummeting. "All batteries, open fire." Alis barked. The station's automated defenses sprang to life, kinetic railguns and plasma turrets locking onto the invaders. They fired in unison, filling space with streaks of energy and metal. Some found their targets, shredding the smaller ships into ragged pieces, but the larger ones, they shifted almost fluidly, their bodies warping to absorb impacts. Then, to Alis's horror, the damaged ships began rebuilding themselves. "By the void," someone whispered. The Revenants were already adapting. The largest of the creatures, nearly the size of a cruiser, unleashed another barrage. This time, the beams struck the station's outer ring, cutting clean through the docking arms. The severed structures twisted away, pulled into the abyss. A freighter still attached to one of the arms was dragged with it, its desperate distress signal cutting off as it vanished into the rift's energy field. "We've lost docking ring Bravo," Reza shouted. Alis gritted her teeth. "Evacuate all personnel from the outer rings. Get them into the core." She slammed a button on the comms panel. "This is Commander Vren to all hands. Fall back to internal sectors and brace for impact. Perseus Prime is under attack. I repeat, this is not a drill." The station shuddered again as another barrage carved through its superstructure. "We have to get a distress signal out," Reza said. "Fleet Command needs to know what's happening." Alis turned to the comms officer. "Lieutenant, send a Priority 1 distress beacon to—" "I can't." The officer's voice wavered. "Something's jamming us. Long-range comms are dead." Cold dread seeped into Alis's bones. This wasn't just a random attack. This was invasion protocol. The Revenants had cut them off, ensuring no one could call for help. They were alone. Alis forced herself to think. Perseus Prime wasn't a battleship. It was a defense station meant to monitor this sector, not withstand a full-scale assault. Their weapons weren't built for this kind of enemy. Their shields were failing. They wouldn't survive much longer. She turned to Reza. "How many ships do we have docked?" "A few transports, 2 gunships, and 1 heavy cruiser." Alis clenched her jaw. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Then another voice came through the bridge speakers. Harsh, broken, wrong. "Your flesh will serve." A ripple of static followed. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it sounded familiar. "Commander Vren." Alis froze. The voice, it wasn't the Revenants. It was human. distorted, strained, but unmistakable. You left us. You let us die. Recognition slammed into her like a physical blow. Captain Varen Hadrex. He had commanded the Red Sentinel, a patrol ship that had gone missing near the frontier over a year ago. He had been a friend. He had been human. Now he was something else. Alis gripped the edge of the holotable. Captain Hadrex. A sickening, wet noise crackled over the speakers. It took Alis a moment to realize it was laughter. They made me see, Commander. They showed me the future. Let us show you, too. The largest Revenant ship shifted, its outer plating peeling away to reveal something beneath the armor, a human form, fused into the vessel's core, wires and organic tendrils snaking into his flesh. His face was stretched, vacant eyes staring blankly at the station. His mouth moved, forming words, but the voice came through the speakers. You will be one of us. A sharp pulse erupted from the Revenant fleet. A dark haze spread outward, seeping into Perseus Prime systems. Reza paled. Commander, they're hacking us. Screens across the bridge flickered, symbols morphing into strange, shifting patterns. The station's automated defenses powered down. Emergency lights flickered. The oxygen scrubbers cut out for a fraction of a second before rebooting. And then the station doors began unlocking on their own. Alis slammed her fist against the emergency override panel. Lock it down. Seal off the core. The station AI, Sci-Fi, responded in a monotone. Emergency lockdown engaged. The doors sealed, but Alis knew it wouldn't be enough. If the Revenants could take control of the station systems, it was only a matter of time before they cracked through every defense. She had to act now. Reza, get as many people as you can to the transports. Civilians first. Once they're away, I want that cruiser launched. Reza hesitated. Commander, if we leave the station. This station is already lost, Alis said grimly. If we stay, we'll be part of it. Reza swallowed hard but nodded. Understood. Alis turned back to the viewport, watching the Revenant fleet shift and pulse in the darkness. A single thought burned in her mind. This was no mere attack. This was an assimilation. And unless she found a way to stop it, they were already dead. The bulkhead doors shuddered violently as Perseus Prime groaned under the sustained assault. Emergency klaxons howled through the corridors, flashing crimson against metal walls. Commander Alis Vren sprinted down the central access tunnel, her breath coming in short, measured bursts. Around her, officers, engineers, and security personnel scrambled toward the docking bays, their footsteps echoing like gunfire in the chaos. Commander! Lieutenant Reza caught up to her, his face streaked with sweat and soot. We've got the civilians loading onto transports, but we're running out of time. The Revenants are breaching through the lower decks. If we don't launch soon, then we're dead, Alis finished. She turned to the station's AI control panel on the nearest wall. Sci-Fi, reroute all auxiliary power to docking bay shields and disengage artificial gravity in breached sectors. Confirmed. Sci-Fi's monotone voice responded. Warning. Structural integrity at 36%. Hull breaches detected in sections E4 through H9. Life support failure imminent in multiple sectors. Alis clenched her jaw. The station was breaking apart faster than she had hoped. Reza, how many transports are ready? 2 are prepped and launching in 5 minutes. The cruiser Ironclad is still fueling up, but we've got skeleton crews on the gunships. If we can buy just a little more time. An explosion ripped through the hallway ahead, hurling debris and bodies against the walls. A gaping hole where the corridor used to be now yawned into the abyss of space, the vacuum pulling at anything not secured. Emergency blast doors snapped shut, sealing the rupture, but the damage was done. Alis pulled herself to her feet, heart hammering. We're out of time. Get everyone left onto Ironclad now. Reza nodded and turned to their remaining security detail. Move, move, move. Get those hangars secured. The ship-wide comms crackled to life again, and a familiar voice slithered through the static. Still resisting, Commander? Such a waste. Let us free you. Let us make you whole. Hadrex. Alis forced down the bile rising in her throat. Hadrex, if there's still anything left of you, you need to fight this. You were a soldier, you don't let the enemy take you. The voice that answered was thick with something inhuman. I am not taken. I am enlightened. A sickening squelch followed, and then the voice faded into a chorus of whispers, overlapping and writhing in her mind. Alis shoved the comms link away. We need to go. Now. The docking bay loomed ahead, its massive blast doors trembling under the weight of the battle raging outside. The air was thick with the scent of scorched metal and leaking coolant. Inside, crew members rushed between ships, securing the final passengers. Then the far wall imploded. A monstrous form slithered through the gaping wound in the station. It had once been a soldier. Its tattered uniform still clung to portions of its shifting, organic mass, but now it was something else entirely. Its arms had elongated into razor-edged appendages, its face stretched into a grotesque mockery of humanity, black eyes reflecting nothing but hunger. The first security officer to react opened fire, his pulse rifle cutting into the creature's flesh, but the wounds closed almost instantly. The Revenant lurched forward, moving with unnatural speed. Its bladed limbs tore through the officer like paper, flinging blood and viscera across the bay. Fall back. Into the ships. Alis shouted, grabbing Reza's shoulder and shoving him toward the nearest boarding ramp. She raised her sidearm and fired at the creature's head. It barely flinched. The Revenant shrieked, a high-pitched, mind-rending sound that made Alis's vision blur. It lunged at her. A pulse cannon roared. The Revenant was blasted backwards, its writhing form slamming against the hangar wall. The gunship Vanguard's side-mounted cannon whirred, recharging. Commander, get aboard! A voice crackled through her comms. Alis didn't hesitate. She grabbed Reza by the arm and sprinted toward Ironclad, the last heavy cruiser left intact. Around her, gunships and transports launched one by one, slipping through gaps in the enemy blockade. Another explosion rocked the station, tilting the entire hangar sideways. Gravity flickered, and for a moment, bodies and cargo containers alike floated, untethered. Alis grasped the nearest handrail, hauling herself up the boarding ramp. Reza was right behind her. We're in. Seal it. The ramp retracted, and the cruiser's blast doors slammed shut just as another Revenant creature burst into the bay. Punch it! Alis barked into the ship's comms. The deck vibrated beneath her as Ironclad's engines roared to life. The cruiser lurched forward, breaking free of Perseus Prime's crumbling remains. Through the viewport, Alis saw the station tearing apart, whole sections peeling away as Revenant ships consumed it like carrion feeders. A cold, sick feeling settled in her gut. They had escaped. But the war had only just begun. The Ironclad tore through space at maximum velocity, its engines straining as the cruiser hurtled away from the wreckage of Perseus Prime. The viewports framed a scene of devastation, the once proud station now a shattered carcass, its remaining pieces being swallowed by the endless void. Commander Alis Vren stood on the bridge, her fingers gripping the console as she watched the disaster unfold. The crew bustled around her, voices sharp and hurried, status reports flowing through the air like battle cries. But all Alis could focus on was the gnawing sensation in her gut. Escape had come too easily. "Commander," Lieutenant Reza called, breaking her thoughts. "The Revenants aren't pursuing us." Alis turned sharply. "What?" Reza's brow furrowed as he studied the sensor readouts. "They're just lingering near the station's remains. A few scout ships peeled off, but none are actively following." "That doesn't make sense," Alis murmured. "Hadrex wouldn't let us go without a chase." She turned to the comms officer. "Any intercepted transmissions? Any signs of cloaked vessels?" "Negative, Commander. It's eerie." A cold weight settled in Alis's chest. The Revenants weren't mindless killers. They had strategy, patience. Letting Ironclad escape meant one thing: they wanted them to leave. "Keep long-range scans active," Alis ordered. "Maintain high alert until we reach safe harbor." Reza shifted uneasily beside her. "Safe harbor? Where exactly are we going?" Most of the colonies in this sector are already under siege. The moment we drop from FTL, we risk leading the Revenants straight to whatever's left. We need a rendezvous point, somewhere off the charts, Alis said. She turned to the ship's AI, its interface glowing dimly on the bridge's main console. Cipher, pull up any unregistered celestial bodies within our current trajectory, preferably ones with natural defenses or debris fields. Processing, the AI responded. After a moment, a holographic map flickered to life. There is a viable location within range, an asteroid field near the remnants of Orion Delta. High-density mineral composition creates significant interference with standard scanning methods. Alis nodded. That'll have to do. Adjust course. We'll lay low and reassess. The engines shifted, recalibrating for the new trajectory. As the ship sped into the unknown, Alis stole one last glance at the viewport, the remains of Perseus Prime now a distant shadow. They had survived the assault. But the real danger was still ahead. 2 hours later, the asteroid field loomed before them, a chaotic mass of tumbling rock and frozen debris stretching across the void. Fragments of shattered moons and planetary remnants drifted lazily, their surfaces scarred from millennia of impacts. The ironclad's forward thrusters flared as the ship maneuvered into a carefully plotted path, skimming just close enough to let the dense mineral deposits mask their presence. Alis paced the bridge, every nerve on edge. Something wasn't right. There had been no further sightings of Revenant ships, no intercepted communications, just silence. Reza, status? No sign of pursuit. No anomalies on long-range scans. If they're out there, they're staying well hidden. Alis frowned. The Revenants weren't known for subtlety. Their assaults were relentless, brutal. But this felt like a hunt, a predator playing with its prey. She tapped her comlink. Engineering, status on our damage report? We're patched up enough for short-range jumps, but any prolonged FTL travel is risky, came the chief engineer's voice. I'd recommend at least a few more hours for full system recalibration. Alis exhaled. That would have to do. Understood. Keep me updated. A soft chime echoed across the bridge, an incoming data feed. The AI's voice followed. Commander, I have detected a faint anomaly within the asteroid field. It does not match known celestial signatures. Alis's pulse quickened. Define anomaly. Localized gravitational distortions, inconsistent with the field's natural motion. The pattern suggests artificial mass manipulation. A Revenant ship? Reza asked, already reaching for his weapons console. Negative. No detectable Revenant biosignatures. The energy readings suggest a dormant vessel, possibly long abandoned. Alis and Reza exchanged glances. A derelict ship in the middle of nowhere? Too convenient. Bring it up on visuals. The screen flickered, and the image resolved into a haunting sight, a massive ship partially embedded within a drifting asteroid. Its hull was ancient, covered in impact scars and crystalline growths. The design wasn't Revenant. If anything, it looked human, but far older than any known fleet. What the hell is that? Reza murmured. Alis straightened. Only one way to find out. Prep a recon team. We're going aboard. The boarding pod clamped onto the ancient vessel's hull with a dull thud, the airlock cycling open with agonizing slowness. Alis gripped her rifle, stepping forward into the eerie gloom. The ship's corridors were vast and lined with unfamiliar technology, the walls covered in frost and dust from centuries of abandonment. Lights up, she ordered, and her squad activated their helmet beams, casting stark white illumination across the chamber. The silence was oppressive. Not even the hum of life support systems. Whatever had happened here, it had been dead for a long time. Reza swept his scanner across the interior. No active power readings. Looks like life support failed centuries ago. Alis moved toward the nearest console, brushing away a layer of dust. Cipher, can you interface with the system? The AI's voice crackled through her comms. Attempting. The architecture is archaic, but there are residual data fragments. Accessing. The screen flickered weakly, ancient logs scrolling across it in an unreadable script. Then, a grainy hologram sputtered to life. A human face appeared, hollow-eyed, gaunt, speaking in a strained whisper. "If anyone finds this, it's too late. The infection, it started here. We were the first." Alice's blood ran cold. "Reza, get this ship mapped now. I want to know exactly what we just walked into." The hologram continued, static distorting the words. "They were waiting. Watching. The Revenants didn't find us. We found them." A sudden noise echoed from deeper within the ship, a soft, wet sound, like something moving. Reza lifted his rifle, eyes narrowing. "Commander, we're not alone." Alice slowly turned, gripping her weapon tighter. From the darkness, something stirred. And then it moved. A shiver ran down Commander Alis Vren's spine as the sound echoed through the derelict ship's corridors. It was faint, a wet, organic shuffle, something moving within the ancient wreckage. Her fingers tightened around her rifle. "Squad, form up," she ordered, her voice low but firm. "We move together." Reza and the other operatives immediately shifted into a protective formation, weapons raised. The glow of their helmet beams cut through the thick darkness, revealing more of the ship's decrepit interior. Strange crystalline formations protruded from the walls, glistening like frozen veins. Some had fused with what looked like the remains of crew members, their skeletal forms trapped in a grotesque embrace. "This place is a graveyard," Reza muttered. "We need to get what we can and get the hell out." Alice signaled for Sci-Fi to continue decoding the ship's logs. "We still don't know what happened here. If this ship was the origin of the Revenants, there might be something." A sudden shriek erupted from the corridor ahead. The squad snapped their rifles up as something darted out of the shadows. It was fast, inhumanly fast. The creature lunged, its form barely visible in the dim light. Alice fired first, her rifle's pulse round slamming into the thing's twisted body. It screeched, its mass twisting unnaturally before collapsing to the ground. For a brief moment, silence returned. Reza stepped forward, cautiously lowering his weapon. Was that? The creature moved. Its body convulsed, reshaping itself. Its limbs stretched, bones snapping into new configurations. Within seconds, it stood again, but this time taller, sharper, more lethal. "Fall back," Alice barked. The team unleashed a hail of gunfire, but the creature barely flinched. It lunged again, slashing through one of the operatives with sickening ease. Blood sprayed across the corridor walls as the soldiers' screams were cut short. "Retreat to the pod," Alice shouted, covering her team as they backed toward their entry point. "Sci-Fi, what the hell are we dealing with?" The AI's voice crackled with urgency. "Analyzing. It appears to be an advanced Revenant strain, adaptive, self-restructuring. This entity is unlike previous encounters. It is evolving." Alice cursed under her breath. "Then we can't let it leave." The creature charged again, but this time Alice was ready. She grabbed a high-yield explosive from her belt and hurled it down the corridor. "Fire in the hole." The explosion rocked the ship, engulfing the creature in flames. The walls groaned under the impact, debris cascading from the ceiling. But Alice didn't wait to see the results. "Move now." They sprinted through the crumbling corridors, barely reaching the boarding pod before another distant screech reverberated through the ship. More of them were waking up. As the pod doors sealed, Reza exhaled heavily. "Tell me we got something useful out of this nightmare." Sci-Fi processed the collected data. Partial logs recovered. There is evidence that this vessel did not merely encounter the Revenants, it was responsible for their creation. Alice's stomach twisted. What? The ship's crew attempted to harness an unknown biological substance for military applications. The result was the first stage of the Revenant transformation. The infection spread beyond containment. This ship was not a victim, it was the catalyst. Reza swore. "So we just walked into the birthplace of the enemy?" Alice's jaw clenched. "And now they know we were here." As the boarding pod disengaged, She looked out at the dying wreck. The Revenants were no accident. They had been made. And somewhere in the darkness, they were still evolving.